Barbara Cartland, born in 1901, was an English author who left an indelible mark on the world of romantic fiction. With over 700 novels to her name, she became one of the most prolific and commercially successful writers of the 20th century, gaining international recognition for her distinctive storytelling style. Her books, primarily historical romance novels, captivated millions of readers worldwide, earning her the title Queen of Romance. Despite facing critical disapproval throughout her career for being formulaic, Cartland's contributions to the genre cannot be overstated. She popularized the romance novel in its modern form, shaping the expectations of the genre for generations to come. This biography aims to explore not just the incredible extent of Cartland's literary output, but also the woman behind the novels. While her writing defined an era, her life was marked by personal challenges, family relationships, and her own understanding of fame and success. She was a woman of contradictions, an aristocrat with a deep interest in charity, a writer with a reputation for formulaic storytelling, but also a passionate advocate for women and historical preservation. Through this biography, we will explore her early life, rise to literary prominence, and eventual status as a cultural icon, all while considering the lasting impact she left on the world of literature. In this expansive narrative, we will delve into her early childhood and education, her personal relationships, and her remarkable rise to prominence as a writer. We will examine the key themes that defined her work, such as love, duty, and aristocratic values, while assessing her role in shaping the romance genre. This biography will also reflect on Cartland's influence, not only as a prolific author but also as an international brand, and will consider her legacy in the context of the ever-evolving world of popular literature. Finally, it will offer a critical perspective on the challenges she faced and the rewards she reaped, both personally and professionally. Barbara Cartland was born Barbara Jane Cartland on July 9, 1901, in the affluent Edgbaston district of Birmingham, England, to the 8th Baron of Ardwick and his wife, whom she described as loving but strict. The Cartland family was part of the British aristocracy, with significant land and a place in the upper echelons of society. This privileged upbringing influenced much of her early writing, which often featured high society characters embroiled in noble causes and romantic intrigue. Her childhood was not without its challenges. The early death of her father when she was just 11 years old cast a shadow over her formative years, leading to a close relationship with her mother, who became the sole guardian of the family's estate. Barbara's mother, a woman of considerable social stature, took a prominent role in her upbringing, guiding her education and introducing her to society's high circles. However, Barbara often expressed a longing for a more carefree childhood, one that allowed her the freedom to pursue her creative interests. Barbara's early education took place at home and in prestigious private schools. She was well-read as a child, a habit instilled by her mother's belief in the importance of literacy. She developed a love for literature and became particularly interested in storytelling and historical fiction. As a child, she was introduced to the works of authors like Georgette Heyer, whose romantic fiction likely had a lasting impact on her later writing. Despite a sense of isolation due to her aristocratic upbringing, Barbara found solace in books and, later, in writing. She was known for her vivid imagination, often writing stories that reflected her personal dreams of adventure and romance. Her early literary attempts were modest, but they set the foundation for her future career. At the time, she was fascinated by the lives of the British nobility and often wove this fascination into her stories, which would become a hallmark of her later works. Barbara's childhood was marred by the death of her father, a significant emotional blow that shaped her outlook on life. The loss of her father, combined with the stresses of aristocratic life and the social expectations placed on her, made her more introspective and determined to carve out a space for herself through her writing. The strong influence of her mother also pushed her to pursue a life beyond traditional roles for women of her class, and this was a defining characteristic of her later career. In addition to the emotional turmoil, her privileged upbringing provided her with ample exposure to the works of great authors and historical figures, which sparked her desire to write. However, Her early life in the upper echelons of British society also presented its own unique set of challenges. It was a life of strict social codes, high expectations, and limited avenues for self-expression. The intersection of these pressures, her personal losses, her family's expectations, and her desire to write, would be key themes that ran through her work in the years to come. Barbara Cartland's literary journey began not with a grand debut but rather through a series of modest attempts, each one laying the foundation for the extraordinary career that would follow. Her first works were largely shaped by her early experiences with writing, which began as a way to escape from the pressures of her aristocratic life. During the early 1920s, after completing her education, she initially found herself drawn to the world of journalism. She wrote for various newspapers and magazines, contributing articles, short stories, and features that reflected her growing interest in romance and historical drama. It was during these early years that Cartland honed her voice and began to develop the distinctive style that would later characterize her novels. She began writing serials for newspapers, offering the public glimpses of romantic tales, often with a historical backdrop. These initial forays into writing allowed her to test the waters and explore her interests in romance and the intersection of social class, love, and historical setting. However, it wasn't until the 1920s, when Cartland began writing her first full-length novels, that her career truly took off. Her debut novel, Jungle Girl, was published in 1923. It was an adventurous and exotic tale, which, though not her most famous work, marked the beginning of her entry into the literary world. However, it was her subsequent works that garnered her wider attention. She gradually moved toward writing historical romance, a genre that would come to define her career and solidify her place in literary history. Her novels featured strong, independent women and dashing, noble heroes, often set in Regency or Victorian England, though her stories were timeless in their appeal. Despite early struggles to find an audience, Cartland's determination saw her through. In the years following Jungle Girl, she published several novels, which, though not yet recognized as groundbreaking, demonstrated her knack for crafting compelling, if formulaic, plots that adhered to the conventions of romance and historical fiction. These works laid the groundwork for her eventual success, though they were not widely noticed at the time. While Cartland is best known for her novels, her early career in journalism played a significant role in shaping her writing style and introducing her to the public. After leaving school, she briefly worked as a secretary, but it was her time as a journalist that truly shaped her. Cartland's journalistic career included writing for the Daily Express, where she penned articles on a variety of subjects, from fashion to society events. Her exposure to the world of journalism helped her understand the power of mass communication and the importance of audience appeal. Cartland's time as a journalist likely provided her with the insight that would make her novels accessible to a broad readership. Her skills as a journalist, particularly her ability to craft a compelling narrative and keep readers hooked, would later influence her novels, which were known for their brisk pacing, vivid characters, and strong sense of drama. Furthermore, her time in journalism provided her with a deep understanding of the public's interests and what people were drawn to in stories. Cartland was not writing just for herself, but for an audience that craved romance and escapism, and this keen awareness of public taste played a major role in her eventual success. Her stories were designed to captivate readers and whisk them away to a world of passion, intrigue, and nobility, an understanding that had roots in her journalistic experiences. In 1927, at the age of 26, Barbara Cartland married Alexander McCorquodale, a wealthy businessman and future publisher. The marriage brought with it a degree of financial stability, but also tied her more closely to the expectations of British aristocracy. It was a traditional union for a woman of Cartland's social standing, and though the marriage was one of convenience in many ways, it also gave her the freedom to explore her writing more seriously. Her personal life, particularly her marriage, had a significant impact on her work. McCorquodale's business connections allowed her to interact with prominent figures in British society, and Cartland was able to draw from these experiences to shape the characters in her novels. Her understanding of the social dynamics of the upper class, including their interests, issues, and intrigues, would prove invaluable in her portrayal of aristocratic families in her novels. Yet, the relationship between Cartland and her husband was not without its difficulties. While they had 2 children, a son and a daughter, Cartland's emotional investment in her family did not always align with her increasingly independent career ambitions. Her marriage ended in divorce in 1933, marking a turning point in her personal life. Following the dissolution of her marriage, Cartland became more focused on her writing, embracing her newfound independence and further refining her style. Her experiences as a wife and mother would later be reflected in the themes of love and personal growth that were central to her novels. Though Cartland's first marriage was not successful in a conventional sense, it allowed her the opportunity to engage with the upper echelons of society and gave her access to the world of the British elite. These experiences would later inform her writing, particularly her portrayal of aristocratic life and the romantic relationships between strong-willed women and powerful men. Following her divorce, Cartland's career began to shift toward her true calling, writing historical romance. While she had experimented with other genres, it was clear that romance novels were her forte. At a time when popular culture was dominated by more somber literary works, Cartland offered readers a world of escapism where the primary focus was love, honor, and the triumph of good over evil. Her early novels, such as The House of Dreams, 1936, and The Phantom Lover, 1937, demonstrated her growing skill in blending historical settings with romantic storytelling. In these works, Cartland began to hone the formula that would later define her career: noble and aristocratic protagonists, strong female characters, and a storyline that highlighted romance and intrigue within the context of historical events. These novels resonated with readers who sought romantic escapism, and her popularity began to grow. It was during this period that Cartland's ability to write prolifically began to emerge. She found a rhythm in her writing, producing books at a remarkable pace. This prolific output, often creating multiple novels in a single year, became a hallmark of her career. She also began experimenting with writing formulaic plots, where the tension between aristocratic men and women played a central role. Cartland's ability to write quickly and efficiently, combined with her knack for creating engaging, romantic narratives, helped her build a loyal following. The late 1930s and early 1940s marked the start of Cartland's transition into a major literary figure. As her focus shifted toward romance, she attracted a devoted readership that eagerly anticipated each new release. Though her early novels were still relatively unknown outside certain literary circles, her reputation was beginning to grow. In 1941, Cartland's first major success came with the publication of The Secret of the Forest, a historical romance novel that gained widespread popularity. This marked a turning point in her career, as Cartland's unique blend of romance, drama, and historical settings caught the attention of a broader audience. By the mid-1940s, Cartland was well on her way to becoming the prolific and beloved author she is remembered as today. Barbara Cartland's rise to literary prominence did not occur overnight, but rather through a series of carefully crafted steps that capitalized on her growing audience and the evolving demand for romance literature. By the late 1940s, Cartland was firmly entrenched in the world of historical romance, and her writing was beginning to gain recognition beyond her early readers. Her success was not just a result of her prodigious output, but of her ability to tap into a growing desire for escapist literature, particularly among women readers. In 1941, Cartland's work began to attract wider attention with the publication of The Secret of the Forest and subsequent titles. These novels featured strong heroines and heroic leading men, set against the backdrop of a vividly recreated historical world, which was quickly becoming her trademark style. While these early successes were notable, it was in the 1950s and 1960s that Cartland's fame truly exploded. This period saw her solidify her place as a leading figure in the genre of romance fiction, and her works began to be published in large numbers, making her one of the most widely read authors of the time. One of the key factors in Cartland's rise was her ability to produce a steady stream of books. She famously wrote with an astonishing pace, often completing several novels a year. This remarkable work ethic helped build a brand and kept her name in the public eye. Unlike many authors who might take years to write a single book, Cartland's ability to write prolifically allowed her to saturate the market with her works, creating a demand for her books that was almost insatiable. By the 1960s, Barbara Cartland had become one of the most commercially successful authors in Britain. Her works were translated into multiple languages, and her fame spread far beyond the United Kingdom. In many ways, her rise to prominence paralleled the rise of the romance genre as a whole. While earlier romance novels had been confined to niche audiences, Cartland helped bring the genre into the mainstream, making it a dominant force in popular literature. Although romantic fiction existed long before Cartland's time, it was her work that truly helped define the modern romance novel. Cartland was one of the first to create a formula that would become synonymous with the genre: a noble or aristocratic hero, a strong-willed heroine, and a plot that revolved around love, honor, and personal transformation. The romantic tension in her novels often took place within the context of a rigidly structured society, where social class and duty were of paramount importance. What Cartland did differently, however, was to make the romance novel accessible to a mass audience, especially women. She tapped into the fantasies and desires of her readers, providing them with a world where love could conquer all and social restrictions could be overcome. She gave women the freedom to explore their emotions, desires, and personal growth through her characters, who often defied societal norms to pursue love on their own terms. Her novels featured heroines who were often bold, intelligent, and independent, though they were typically constrained by the social structures around them. The male protagonists in Cartland's stories, while sometimes aloof or domineering, were ultimately noble and caring, providing a balance to the more assertive female characters. This dynamic became one of Cartland's signature elements, which would continue to captivate readers for decades. Through her works, Cartland revolutionized the romance genre by making it more accessible, relatable, and entertaining to a wider audience. Her distinctive formula, which blended historical settings, strong female leads, and idealized love stories, helped pave the way for the modern romance novel. She didn't just write love stories. She created an entire genre that would resonate with generations of readers. One of the most extraordinary aspects of Barbara Cartland's career was her ability to write at an astonishing pace. In the 1950s and 1960s, she was writing up to 30 novels a year. This rapid output was not a product of sheer quantity at the expense of quality, but rather a reflection of her meticulous work ethic and organizational skills. Cartland famously worked at a large writing desk in her home, with an elaborate system for organizing her ideas and plots. Her writing was almost entirely dictated, as she did not type her manuscripts herself. Instead, she employed a stenographer to transcribe her thoughts as she spoke them aloud, which allowed her to produce large volumes of work in a short period. Cartland's daily routine was structured to maximize her writing time. She typically spent the early hours of the morning writing, allowing her to complete several thousand words before lunch. The afternoons were devoted to editing and revising, and the evenings were often spent attending to her social engagements or philanthropic endeavors. This disciplined approach to writing allowed her to maintain an impressively high output throughout her career. The sheer volume of Cartland's work was a key element of her success. Unlike many authors who struggle with procrastination or writer's block, Cartland had a natural ability to consistently churn out novels at a rapid pace. This not only ensured that her readers always had something new to look forward to, but it also solidified her as a major presence in the literary world. In fact, by the time of her death in 2000, Cartland had written more than 700 novels, a staggering achievement that remains unmatched in the romance genre. Barbara Cartland's influence on the romance genre is immeasurable. She helped to define what romance fiction would become in the 20th century, particularly in the way that love stories were told in historical contexts. Her novels, with their vivid descriptions, dramatic plots, and idealized characters, became the blueprint for many of the romance novels that followed. She was also one of the first authors to make romance novels an industry. Through her consistent output and her ability to cater to the demands of the genre, Cartland established herself as a commercial force. She understood that the success of a genre depended not just on the quality of the writing, but on the ability to create a brand that readers could identify with and return to again and again. Her novels, often characterized by their distinctive pink covers and titles that invoked a sense of mystery and romance, became instantly recognizable and were marketed effectively to a mass audience. Furthermore, Cartland's influence extended beyond her writing. She became an iconic figure in popular culture, frequently appearing in the media and maintaining a public persona that reinforced the image of the Queen of Romance. Her style, both in her novels and in her public life, became synonymous with romance itself. She was the face of the genre, and her persona helped shape the way romance fiction was perceived by the public. As a pioneer of the genre, Cartland's legacy continues to influence modern romance writers. Her formulaic approach to storytelling, her focus on emotional fulfillment, and her ability to create larger-than-life characters have become hallmarks of the genre. Cartland's work laid the foundation for the romance novels that would follow, ensuring her place as one of the most important figures in the literary history of romance fiction. By the 1970s and 1980s, Barbara Cartland had become a household name, not just in the United Kingdom, but around the world. The sheer number of books she published, coupled with her distinctive brand, made her one of the most recognized authors in the genre of romance fiction. Her prolific output, which included over 700 novels, earned her a place in the Guinness Book of World Records as one of the world's most prolific authors. At the height of her career, Cartland was reportedly selling millions of copies of her books every year, with her works being translated into multiple languages and sold in countries across the globe. Cartland's success was not merely confined to her literary output. She became an international brand, with her name synonymous with romantic fiction. Publishers worldwide were eager to secure her next manuscript, knowing that her books would fly off the shelves. Her books were regularly bestsellers, and she was one of the highest-paid authors of her time. The sheer volume of her work ensured that her novels were widely accessible, and her consistency in producing books meant that she was able to maintain a loyal fan base that continued to grow with each new release. One of the factors that contributed to Cartland's success was her ability to cater to the tastes of a wide readership. She wrote not only historical romance novels, but also contemporary stories that expanded her reach to different demographics. This ability to diversify her writing allowed her to maintain her relevance in a constantly changing literary landscape. However, it was the historical romance novels that continued to define her career, and these remained the most popular among her readers. Cartland's ability to create captivating, idealized worlds set in the past allowed her readers to escape from the pressures of modern life and indulge in a world of passion, nobility, and chivalry. In addition to her novels, Cartland also made forays into other forms of media, including television and film adaptations of her works. Several of her books were adapted into successful television series, and her name became associated with the romantic genre in popular culture. She was frequently featured in the press, attending public events and charity functions, where she was often lauded for her charitable endeavors as much as for her literary achievements. Barbara Cartland's writing style was a significant factor in her commercial success. She was known for her ability to write quickly and efficiently, producing large volumes of work in a short period of time. Her style was straightforward and often formulaic, but it was precisely this simplicity and predictability that appealed to her readers. Cartland's novels were known for their consistency. Each novel followed a similar structure, with familiar tropes, settings, and character types. The basic structure of a Cartland novel was often a love story between an aristocratic or noble man and a strong-willed woman, often set in historical contexts such as Regency or Victorian England. The hero was typically a man of great wealth, high social standing, and a sense of duty, while the heroine was often an independent woman who would defy societal expectations in pursuit of love. The conflicts in her stories often revolved around misunderstandings, class barriers, and societal pressure, but they were always resolved in a satisfying, if predictable, manner. Cartland's writing was marked by a strong sense of idealism. Her characters often embodied the highest ideals of love, honor, and duty, and the plots were infused with a sense of romanticism that transcended the realities of everyday life. Her books were escape literature, stories of unattainable love and perfect heroes and heroines that allowed readers to immerse themselves in a world of beauty, elegance, and passion. In a world of political and social upheaval, Cartland's novels offered a welcome escape into a world where love conquered all. Though some critics dismissed her work as formulaic and lacking in literary depth, Cartland's novels were enormously popular. Her success proved that there was a wide audience for romance novels that were easy to read, entertaining, and emotionally satisfying. Cartland's formula, though criticized by some, became the standard for many romance writers who followed in her wake. Barbara Cartland was not just a prolific author, she was also a media personality who cultivated a public persona that complemented her brand as the queen of romance. She was known for her flamboyant appearance, often wearing elaborate dresses, feather boas, and brightly colored outfits, which made her an unmistakable figure in the public eye. Her distinct look, along with her confident personality, made her a fixture in the British social scene. She was often seen attending high-profile events, including charity galas, royal functions, and public speaking engagements, where she discussed her books and her charitable work. Her media presence was integral to her success, as it helped to solidify her status as an icon of the romance genre. Cartland understood the power of publicity and was adept at leveraging her public image to promote her books. She often gave interviews, appeared on talk shows, and made appearances at book signings, where she charmed fans with her wit and larger-than-life personality. Beyond her public appearances, Cartland was also a frequent subject of gossip columns and tabloids, where her personal life and relationships were often discussed. Though she was known for her romantic fiction, Cartland's own love life was the subject of much intrigue. Her numerous marriages, her relationships with influential figures, and her personal views on love and relationships were widely publicized, further cementing her image as the embodiment of romantic idealism. Cartland also had a significant presence in the publishing world, where her books were heavily marketed, often with her distinctive pink covers and titles designed to evoke a sense of mystery and romance. The marketing of her books was as much a part of her success as the content itself. Her books became a brand, and the Cartland name was synonymous with romance, elegance, and escapism. Throughout her life, Barbara Cartland was deeply involved in charitable work, and her philanthropy became an important part of her public image. She was known for her commitment to causes related to children's welfare, animal rights, and the preservation of British heritage. Cartland's charitable endeavors often took center stage in her life, and she was frequently involved in various charity events, using her fame to raise funds and awareness for numerous causes. One of her most notable charitable contributions was her involvement in the preservation of historic buildings and estates. As an aristocrat with a deep love for history, Cartland was passionate about maintaining Britain's cultural heritage. She used her wealth and influence to support initiatives aimed at saving historic landmarks and properties from demolition or neglect. Her interest in heritage preservation aligned with the themes of her novels, which often featured aristocratic settings and historical environments. In addition to her work with heritage preservation, Cartland was also a staunch advocate for children's education and well-being. She was actively involved in raising funds for children's hospitals, and she worked with various organizations dedicated to improving the lives of disadvantaged children. Cartland's philanthropic efforts earned her widespread respect, and she was seen as someone who used her fame and fortune to make a positive impact on society. Despite the criticism of her literary work, Cartland's charitable activities were widely praised, and she earned numerous accolades for her contributions to various causes. Her commitment to philanthropy became an integral part of her identity, and it reinforced her image as a figure who, despite her romantic ideals, cared deeply for the real-world issues affecting people and communities. By the late 1980s and 1990s, Barbara Cartland was firmly established as one of the most successful and influential authors in the world. Even though the romance genre was evolving, with new voices and new forms of storytelling emerging, Cartland remained a beloved figure in popular culture. Her books continued to sell in large numbers, and her name was associated with the golden age of romantic fiction. Cartland's ability to stay relevant in an ever-changing literary landscape was a testament to her understanding of her audience. She continued to produce novels at an astonishing rate, and her books remained in high demand. Though critics may have been less kind to her later works, Cartland's readers remained loyal, finding comfort and joy in her familiar brand of romance. Her influence on the genre was undeniable. Cartland's formulaic approach to romance, while often criticized for lacking literary depth, helped to establish the romance novel as a dominant force in popular literature. Her legacy is one of escapism, fantasy, and emotional fulfillment, a legacy that continues to resonate with readers of romantic fiction today. As the 1990s unfolded, Barbara Cartland's once dominant position in the romance genre began to face significant challenges. While she continued to write prolifically, her work began to feel increasingly out of step with the evolving tastes of readers. The market for historical romance was no longer as booming as it had been in the 1970s and 1980s. Romantic fiction had begun to diversify, and new authors with a more contemporary approach were gaining popularity. Writers like Nora Roberts and Julie Garwood brought new perspectives to romance, often incorporating more modern settings, contemporary issues, and more complex characters into their stories. Cartland's traditional formula, her reliance on aristocratic settings, predictable plots, and idealized characters, began to appear formulaic to a new generation of readers. While her early works had defined an era, by the 1990s, they were increasingly seen as relics of the past. Despite Cartland's continued work ethic and her vast catalog, there was a perceptible shift in the literary landscape that made it harder for her to maintain the same level of commercial success she had once enjoyed. Moreover, Cartland's approach to romance writing, while wildly successful in its time, was sometimes criticized for being overly simplistic and lacking in depth. This criticism grew stronger as new trends emerged in the genre. For example, romance novels in the 1990s began to reflect more diverse characters, complex emotional struggles, and greater attention to realistic relationships. While Cartland's heroines were strong-willed and independent, they were often idealized, and her plotlines rarely deviated from their traditional structure. As the romance genre evolved, Cartland's work increasingly appeared outdated to younger readers, and her popularity began to wane. Despite the changing tides of the literary world, Cartland remained remarkably active in her later years. Well into her 80s and 90s, she continued to write at the same pace that had defined her earlier career. Her output, though not as prolific as it had been in her prime, was still substantial. She maintained the same strict routine, dictating her stories to a stenographer and churning out new books, many of which were published under her name or through the company she had set up to manage her literary legacy. Her ability to maintain this level of productivity was both impressive and somewhat iconic. Cartland was fiercely independent, and she continued to see herself as a writer first and foremost, determined to contribute to the world of romance fiction as long as she could. Though her later works didn't match the commercial success of her earlier career, she remained devoted to the craft of writing, producing dozens of novels in the final decades of her life. Her tenacity and commitment to writing were a testament to her passion for the genre and her enduring love for the escapist fantasy that romance novels offered her readers. At the same time, she continued to maintain a public persona, making occasional public appearances and continuing her charitable endeavors. She rarely shied away from the media spotlight and, despite her declining popularity in the book world, she remained a figure of interest to the public. Her eccentric personality, her unique fashion choices, and her ongoing involvement in British social life kept her in the public eye. Though Barbara Cartland had enjoyed an extraordinary career, her later years were marked by increased criticism. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, some critics began to re-evaluate her legacy, and not all the assessments were kind. Many viewed her writing as overly formulaic and criticized her portrayal of women, which often seemed to reinforce outdated gender roles. Cartland's characters, while often strong, were typically idealized to the point of being unrealistic, and her plots were criticized for their lack of depth and complexity. Her focus on aristocratic, historical settings was also increasingly seen as outdated in a world that was evolving rapidly, both socially and culturally. The modern romance genre was moving toward more diverse and contemporary narratives, and the public perception of Cartland's works began to shift. Critics began to argue that her books represented an idealized version of a past that many readers found increasingly irrelevant. Furthermore, her tendency to write quickly, without much time for revision or reflection, led to accusations that her later works lacked the polish and refinement of her earlier novels. Some even questioned the quality of her writing, pointing out repetitive phrases, cliched plot points, and an over-reliance on stock characters. While Cartland remained largely unaffected by the negative reviews, the criticisms were impossible to ignore, and they marked a significant change in her public image. As Cartland entered her later years, she began to slow down. Though her mental acuity remained sharp, her physical health began to decline. By the late 1990s, Cartland had been diagnosed with a variety of age-related health issues. She continued to write, but she became less active in public life. Her public appearances became rare, and she began to retreat from the social spotlight she had once so eagerly embraced. During this time, her focus shifted to the legacy she would leave behind. She began to organize her estate and ensure that her literary works would continue to be published long after her death. She also devoted much of her time to her charitable causes, particularly those related to children's welfare and animal rights. Although her physical health was deteriorating, her commitment to her causes remained unwavering. Despite her declining health, Cartland remained a beloved figure among her fans. Many of her readers, particularly those who had grown up reading her novels, continued to support her work, and her books remained in print well into the 2000s. She was able to enjoy the fruits of her labor, knowing that her legacy in the world of romance fiction was secure. Barbara Cartland passed away on May 21, 2000, at the age of 98. At the time of her death, she had published over 700 novels, making her one of the most prolific authors in literary history. Though her popularity had declined in the final years of her life, her impact on the romance genre was undeniable. She had single-handedly redefined romance fiction and had established a legacy that would endure for decades to come. In her final years, Cartland's work and her public persona remained intertwined. She was remembered not only for her writing but also for her larger-than-life personality, her commitment to charitable causes, and her devotion to the romance genre. Her death marked the end of an era in romance fiction, but her legacy lived on through her books, which continued to be published and enjoyed by readers around the world. In the years following her death, Cartland's works have been revisited by a new generation of readers, and her influence on the genre remains as strong as ever. Her contribution to the romance novel remains a cornerstone of the literary landscape, and her impact on popular culture continues to be felt. Though her later years were marked by challenges and criticism, Barbara Cartland remains one of the most important figures in the history of romantic fiction. Despite the decline in Barbara Cartland's popularity in the years before her death, her legacy within the romance genre has endured long after her passing. Her books, which once flew off the shelves in record numbers, continue to be read and loved by new generations of readers. Publishers have kept her catalog in print, and her novels remain a staple of the romance fiction market. While her writing style and themes may seem old-fashioned to some, Cartland's ability to craft tales of love, adventure, and escape continues to resonate with readers looking for light-hearted, feel-good romance stories. One of the key reasons for the lasting appeal of Cartland's work is the escapist nature of her stories. Readers who are drawn to her books during their youth often return to them as adults, finding comfort in the predictability and idealized world she created. Cartland's novels are, in many ways, timeless in their focus on universal themes, love, honor, and social duty, set in grand, romanticized historical periods. The world she depicted was one where passion triumphed over adversity, where love conquered class divisions and social expectations. Her works continue to attract readers who are looking for uncomplicated love stories, filled with fantasy and emotional resolution. For many, Cartland's novels provide a kind of nostalgic retreat into a simpler, more elegant world. Even as the romance genre has evolved to include more complex and diverse narratives, there remains a market for Cartland's brand of romantic fiction. She wrote with a consistency and determination that ensured her stories would be remembered and cherished long after her era had passed. Barbara Cartland's impact on the romance genre cannot be overstated. As one of the most prolific authors of her time, she played a pivotal role in shaping the landscape of popular romance fiction. Her influence extends far beyond her own body of work, as she inspired countless other writers who sought to emulate her success and follow in her footsteps. Cartland's brand of historical romance, with its emphasis on idealized relationships, noble heroes, and strong-willed heroines, set the tone for an entire generation of writers. Her formulaic style, while often criticized for its predictability, became the standard for many romance authors who followed her. Cartland's ability to craft stories that were both emotionally satisfying and easily accessible allowed her to create a genre that appealed to a wide audience. Many contemporary romance writers have acknowledged her influence, with her works often cited as an early inspiration. Writers like Danielle Steele and Jude Deveraux, though distinct in their own styles, have been influenced by Cartland's romantic ideals and her ability to create sweeping, larger-than-life love stories. One of the key ways in which Cartland revolutionized the genre was by making romance novels a popular, accessible form of entertainment. Before her rise to fame, romance novels were often relegated to niche markets or dismissed as frivolous literature. Cartland helped to bring the genre into the mainstream, making it one of the most commercially successful categories in publishing. Her success proved that there was a vast, untapped audience for romantic fiction, and she helped to establish romance as a respected and lucrative genre in its own right. Her emphasis on writing for a female audience also shaped the genre. Cartland's novels were written primarily with women in mind, and her portrayal of female characters as strong, independent, and ultimately rewarded for their resilience and courage became a defining characteristic of many romance novels that followed. While her portrayal of women was sometimes criticized for being overly idealized, it nonetheless helped to shape the modern portrayal of women in romance novels as capable of achieving happiness and fulfillment on their own terms. Barbara Cartland was more than just a writer. She became a cultural icon in the world of romance fiction. Her public persona, flamboyant, outspoken, and unapologetically romantic, was integral to her success. Cartland understood the power of branding, and she cultivated an image of herself as the ultimate romantic figure. Her distinctive style, with her bright clothing and dramatic flair, made her instantly recognizable, and her eccentricities only added to her mystique. Cartland's personality and public appearances contributed to her influence beyond the pages of her books. She became a fixture in British society, attending charity events, participating in high society functions, and contributing to various philanthropic causes. Her social standing allowed her to integrate her personal life with her professional one, and she became a symbol of romance not only through her writing but through her own lifestyle. The Cartland brand extended beyond her books to encompass her charitable work, her relationship with the media, and her distinctive fashion choices. She became synonymous with the idea of romance in the popular imagination, creating an enduring cultural image of the romantic ideal. Even as the world around her changed, Cartland's commitment to maintaining this image helped her remain a prominent figure in the cultural consciousness, even during periods of declining book sales. Her fame and public persona inspired the creation of merchandise, media adaptations, and even a Cartland-themed estate. She became an enduring symbol of escapism, and her image as the ultimate romantic figure has continued to influence the broader cultural understanding of what romance can represent. Her life and work helped shape the romantic genre into what it is today, and her legacy as the Queen of Romance is secure. After Barbara Cartland's death in 2000, her work continued to live on through posthumous reprints and adaptations. Her novels, which had enjoyed decades of success during her lifetime, are still widely available and continue to find new audiences. Many of her works have been reissued in special editions, and her books are often found in the collections of libraries and bookstores around the world. In addition to reprints of her books, Cartland's influence has been extended through adaptations of her work into films and television. Though not as numerous as some of the adaptations of other romance authors, her stories have been translated into several television films, some of which have been popular in both the UK and internationally. These adaptations have helped to introduce Cartland's work to new audiences and have ensured that her legacy remains alive in popular culture. Her name also continues to be associated with charitable causes. Though she is no longer alive to spearhead these efforts herself, Cartland's foundation and the causes she championed, particularly in the areas of children's welfare and animal rights, continue to operate in her name. Her legacy as a philanthropist has helped preserve her status as an influential figure in British social life and has ensured that her impact goes beyond just her literary contributions. While contemporary romance authors may not be emulating her formula to the same extent, Cartland's influence remains undeniable. Her contribution to the popularization of romance fiction helped pave the way for modern writers in the genre, and her impact on the broader cultural understanding of romance continues to resonate. She may have been criticized in her later years for the repetitive nature of her work, but there is no denying that she helped create the romance genre as it is known today. Barbara Cartland's legacy as one of the most prolific and influential authors in the history of romance fiction is secure. Through her determination, her prolific writing, and her unflinching commitment to her brand of romantic storytelling, she shaped the genre for decades and built a lasting literary empire. Even as her work came under increasing scrutiny and her popularity declined in the years before her death, Cartland's place in the history of romantic fiction was firmly established. Her life and career were marked by both triumph and controversy, but her enduring popularity, her impact on the romance genre, and her status as a cultural icon continue to define her legacy. She remains, to this day, an important figure in the world of romance fiction, and her influence on the genre is as profound as ever. Whether readers are rediscovering her works or encountering them for the first time, Cartland's books continue to provide a window into a world of romance, passion, and idealized love, ensuring that her place in literary history will not be forgotten.